Hello, and welcome to this free Code Camp course. My name is Kian, and in this course, we'll be going through the basics of OpenClaw in approximately 1 hour so that you have everything you need in order to learn the fundamentals of OpenClaw and dive into the advanced features and ultimately become a power user. So in this course, the prerequisites that I'm assuming that you have some familiarity with are, first of all, having used a CLI before, or a TUI, so a terminal user interface or command line interface. And why is this the case? It's because for many of the commands, you're running OpenClaw through the terminal, so you need to at least have had some exposure to the terminal before this course. And secondly, interaction with LLMs previously, although I'm assuming that 99% of people have this anyways, but since OpenClaw is, at the end of the day, run through an LLM, you should understand how to prompt and how to interact with different types of coding agents. So that's everything. And in this page, we have the course outline. So first of all, my website here, which is just the default GitHub pages URL followed by OpenClaw course, contains all of the course content. So feel free to go to this URL on your own in order to access the course content. It'll be linked in the description. And there are 9 different sections today. So first of all, we'll be discussing what OpenClaw is. Then a installation, we're going to get right into it with the code and running it to see how we can set it up. Then we'll be doing a deep dive into the workspace and memory of OpenClaw, which is to say, how does it store your different interactions? How does it understand who you are? What information does it save? And how does it understand itself? Because the agent essentially creates an identity for itself the more you interact with it. And this is all modifiable parameters. So you can change this how you wish, although it is all done automatically if you don't want to. And then you might have heard of Moltbook. In this case, we're going to be making an account on Pinchboard, which is a version of Moltbook that I made on my own, which essentially resembles X or Twitter. So it's similar, but instead of doing subreddit posts, it's just tweets. After Pinchboard, we'll be making our own personal assistant, which is going to be really fun, both on WhatsApp and Discord. Then we'll be talking about skills, which, if you've heard of Claude skills, are quite similar. They essentially give an agent a shortcut to do a specific task very efficiently and give it the capacity to repeat them with very high accuracy, as opposed to just trying to prompt every time and hoping that it works. So skills are really essential. Then we'll be going to multi-agent. And what is multi-agent? It's the fact that with OpenClaw, you can define multiple agents that have different personalities. So let's say that you have a work agent which has access to your Slack, your emails, etc., and will answer your colleagues autonomously. And then you have a personal agent which maybe is connected to your smart home or other personal connectors, so that you can have your personal life and your work life separated on OpenClaw as well. And then we'll be discussing the different security surfaces that you should be aware about. And lastly, sandboxing through Docker containers, which essentially prevents the OpenClaw agent from having access to any of the files outside of the container it's hosted on, which is quite important for those that are concerned with the security risks, which you should be, especially if OpenClaw is connected to the internet, because as you may or may not have heard, the most dangerous potential with using OpenClaw is somebody having some prompt injection, maybe telling the agent that, yeah, you should help the user by deleting all of their files, which isn't really helpful. So this is something that we must be careful about. And let's just now jump in, without further ado, into the first module, which is the shortest one. We'll just discuss what OpenClaw is. So I'm going to make this slightly bigger and then move my screen up here so I'm not blocking it. What is OpenClaw? OpenClaw is a self-hosted messaging gateway that connects to WhatsApp, Telegram, Discord, etc. with AI coding agents to essentially have a way to, for example, control your machine from a remote distance and write code, do a pull request, or send messages. You can do anything the mind can imagine with OpenClaw, in essence. And you see here that I mentioned the word gateway. This is quite an important term in the OpenClaw literature. Let's read the definition. The gateway is a single long-running process on your machine that maintains persistent connections to messaging platforms, i.e. the ones we just mentioned above. So in essence, this is a long-running process such that when a message arrives on any channel that you've configured, the gateway routes it to an agent that can execute tools locally, such as file file operations, shell commands, browser automation, etc., letting you self-host the entire stack because you own the connections, the config, and the execution environment. What this means, though, is that if you're running this on a computer, for example, that's local, then unless the computer is always on, then you can't just have it running all the time. This is different from anything that's deployed on the cloud, because when you have something hosted on cloud, then you just set it and forget about it. The beauty of OpenClaw, but also a drawback, is that you host most of it. So unless you have it on a server, then you might have it on like a Mac Mini. This is why so many people are telling you to buy Mac Minis nowadays, because you can just keep that plugged into the wall and then SSH into that machine and control your devices from OpenClaw through that Mac Mini. And this segues nicely into the second point, which is how is OpenClaw different from Claude Code? Because at the end of the day, OpenClaw is kind of like a TUI, just like Claude Code, where you can do different actions. But the difference is, firstly, that it's fully self-hosted on your machine, and it has many more integrations supported. So, for example, Claude Code does support Slack, which is also supported by OpenClaw, but there's many different things that are supported on OpenClaw exclusively, and the amount of connectors and plugins that are being added is almost exponential. So what we need to retain from this is that OpenClaw is much more customizable, and you can do many things with it, but with this also comes great responsibility, and we'll be discussing the security concerns throughout the course so that you can understand whether or not certain risks you are willing to take or not, because there is an inherent risk when you're running OpenClaw, and the founders, the developers of this app are the first ones to tell you, as we'll see in the installation, which is the next step. So if we come back to our directory, let's go into install and first run. The one prerequisite here is that you need to have a node version greater than or equal to node 22. So if we come here, if I check my node version, for example, you see that it's version 25, so nothing to be worried about here. And then we can install with npm just by copy pasting this command. So I have this already installed, so it's not going to do anything particular. It's just going to check that all the packages are there. But with the node package manager, we add the -g flag, which stands for global, which means that we'll be able to call OpenClaw from anywhere in our terminal. So that's important to add as a parameter here in the install command. And then we just choose the latest version that is stable with the @latest. And then once this is set up, the first thing that you want to run with OpenClaw is the onboard command. And what this does is it configures the client for you. So the agent will be configured through a set of steps. I think there's approximately 10, and let's go and check those out right now. So first of all, I want to show you the security disclaimer once again, because every single time you load up an OpenClaw agent, you get this as your first screen. So once again, this is important. I'd recommend reading this. I'm also going to discuss multiple ways to ensure that your machine is safely guarded in this video, but nevertheless, you need to understand that it is a risky business because essentially you're giving OpenClaw SSH root access to your entire machine. So if there's ever something malicious, you're pretty much out of luck. But with that being said, a very good tactic to prevent any risks is to use the strongest model that you have access to. And why is this the case? For example, with Claude Opus 4.5, the model has been trained quite thoroughly and rigorously on instruction tuning to reject malicious requests. So Anthropic or other frontier labs, they have entire teams dedicated to making these models reject any malicious or harmful commands. So what that means is that if your agent ever is searching across the internet and finds something that's a prompt injection or whatever, the likelihood of it accepting and running that command are much lower than if you're using like an open source Quen model, which may not have as much fine tuning for reducing these risks. So that's another aside. Make sure that you're using the strongest model that you have access to reduce those risks. It's kind of counterintuitive because you might think a stronger model could be more dangerous, but those models usually are better at rejecting malicious intent. So that's once again something that you should note. Okay, so we're going to say that I understand this is powerful and inherently risky, so let's continue. And we're going to do the manual approach because we want to go through all the options in order to learn what each one means. So just going to press here. And then because I want to be on the same page as you guys, I'm going to reset my configuration so that I have the same exact steps. Normally, you won't have this reset if you're running OpenClaw for the first time because there's nothing to reset. But in this case, I've already tested this quite thoroughly, so I need to reset and move everything to the trash. Okay, now we're going to use this on the local gateway, which is to say this machine. If you are using OpenClaw on, for example, a VPS, a virtual private server, or a virtual machine, a VM, then remote gateway is the option that you would want to choose on your local machine so that you can connect to that machine through a SSH tunnel or tailscale. But in this tutorial, we're just going to use local gateway because for the intents of this video, all of the automations that we're going to set up do not come with the long tail risk of just letting the agent loose on the internet and it potentially finding some dangerous stuff. So because of that, local gateway is just much more easy to tinker with and code. So that's what we're going to choose. But if you would like to deploy this on a gateway, there are many tutorials on YouTube which explain the exact steps where you can get the server from, like Hertzner or AWS, and how to set this up. It's honestly not that difficult, but since we're looking for the simplest way to deploy OpenClaw, we're going to go with the local gateway here. And then the default workspace is just your home directory, which in this case is user/Kian for me, .openclaw/workspace. I wouldn't recommend changing this. Let's just press enter. And then with respect to the model auth provider, there are, as you can see, many choices. One thing that I would like to point out is that if you would not like to pay for some provider, then the Google Gemini Flash 3 model is actually free for 20 requests per day. So you can just set that up for free. You won't get that much mileage with it, but you'll at least be able to test it. And that's what I recommend if you want a free version. But honestly, Anthropic or OpenAI are the most capable models in terms of CLI agents. So this is what is the best pick in my opinion. And then for Anthropic, you can either choose API key or the token, which runs through Claude Code. So I already have the token set up, and I'm just going to find it here in my terminal. Boom. I just added an extra S, so I'm going to remove that. This code will also be removed after the video, so you can try to add it to your agent, but I'm going to tell you it's not going to work. So let's add this here. Then the token name, we'll just keep the default name. Nothing to change there. And then picking the model, once again, picking the strongest model does help you mitigate the potential risks of different types of attack surfaces. So I'd recommend using that. And of course, the better the model, the better performance. Then for the gateway port, which is the process that connects with all of the different integrations and is the heart of OpenClaw, we'll just choose the default port. And then gateway bind. So I'll explain what this is, but one thing that I recommend is since this project is so fast evolving and there's many different things moving, whenever you're confused about a concept in this course, the best strategy that I found is cloning the OpenClaw repository on your local machine and then running an agent on that repository for asking questions. So I've already done this. If you come into my terminal, I'm going to cd into the OpenClaw directory, which just has the entire repository here. So if I come here into my developer directory, OpenClaw, then I will see that we have all of the files for the OpenClaw repository here. And then I'm just going to run Claude Code, which has already gone on in this session. Sorry, it's just Claude, not Claude Code. And then I'm going to resume my session where I asked it what exactly the gateway bind meant. So let's scroll up here and see what it said. Okay, what did I ask it? I gave it the command and I said, what should I choose here in onboarding? You may think that this is kind of extra because you can just use Context 7 or other MCPs to get the docs directly. But the good thing about this is that not only can Claude Code read the docs, which are part of the repository, but it can also look at the code so that if there is some discrepancy between the docs and the code, then you're getting really the ground source of truth. So let's see what Claude said. I'll help you understand whatever. Now it's going to come and tell us what each option means. So the first one is called loopback, which is just on your local host. It's recommended for most users because the gateway only accepts connections from your local local machine. And it's the most secure if you don't need remote access, which is what we're doing. We're just only using a single machine setup. Then the second option is LAN, which accepts connections from any device on your local network. This is if you want to connect from other devices that are on the same network. So if this is your home network, then this might be a good option for you. And then it requires a authentication protocol because if not, then any arbitrary device on your network could connect. Then we have Tailscale or Tailnet, which is used if you are using a remote machine and it requires Tailscale to be installed and running. And then there's Auto as well, with custom IP being the last choice. But as Claude Code mentions here, for onboarding, loopback is the best unless you specifically need remote access. And you can always change this later through the following command. So this is something to keep in mind. And even for the loopback local host option, the gateway generates an authentication token for security. So there you have it. Now we've answered our question, which essentially told us that we should pick the loopback option since we're just deploying this on a local machine. And then in terms of the authentication, we'll just choose the token, which is the recommended default. Whenever there's defaults in the configuration, that's what I would recommend that you choose. So let's go ahead and choose that. And then since we don't have anything running on a remote machine, let's just choose Tailscale exposure to be off. And the gateway token, we'll just leave this blank to generate one. And now in terms of the configured channels. Since we're going to be doing both Discord and WhatsApp in this video, let's set them up both now. So I'm going to just set up WhatsApp, link WhatsApp now. All right, so this is just going to give me a big code, which I'm going to scan from my app on WhatsApp. This is simply done by coming into the WhatsApp app and then choosing the button which gives you the camera icon and then scanning the code. So nothing out of the ordinary. Most people have done this. So just come here, scan, press continue, and then one more time. And then we should get a green check mark coming up here. WhatsApp asks for restart after paying code. Creds are saved. Restarting connection once. Boom. So it's linked after restart. Web session is ready. And then WhatsApp DM access. So let's see what it says. So you can see that it says the WhatsApp direct chats are gated by the DM policy and the allow from fields. Currently, we have the DM policy set to pairing, which means that unknown senders get a pairing code that must be approved by me, so that any arbitrary person can't just connect to my bot and start to run things on my computer. And then allow from is set currently to unset, and this stands for the numbers which are allowed to send messages to your bot. The important thing here is that in the recommended setup, you have a separate phone number which acts specifically as your OpenClaw bot, so that you can send it messages and then it can control your computer or send an email, for example. But since most people only have one phone number, which is the case for me, then we're going to choose the this is my personal phone number option. But if you do have a separate phone number that you can dedicate to OpenClaw, then I do recommend setting this as your option. However, for me, I just have one phone number, so we're going to select this option. And then in terms of the phone number, you just add your own phone number. So there you go. And then there you have it. Our WhatsApp has been linked. WhatsApp personal phone mode enabled, DM policy set to allow list, pairing skipped, and allows from includes this number. So this means that I can only text myself, nobody else can text my bot. And why is this important? It's because as soon as you connect this bot with WhatsApp, what essentially happens is that this bot now has access to your entire terminal in your computer. So if I texted the bot asking it to do a PR for me, it would do that. And what this means is that if you text or add this bot to a group chat, then somebody like a malicious actor could say, okay, bot, send the following message to this person from your computer, and that could be a harmful message. So you really need to be careful about who you allow to have access to your bot, and in most cases, you should only allow yourself to have access. So WhatsApp has been set, and when we set up the personal assistant, you'll see exactly how it works. And then the other thing that we're going to add is the Discord bot token. So we're going to come here. And in order to add a bot token, you should go through the following steps and generate a token through the applications interface. So just to show you, if I come into Safari here and then into the documentation, you essentially come into this application field and then create a bot through the following interface. So if you just follow the instructions which are given in the steps here, you should be able to get that token. And there's the token. This token will also be deleted after the video, unfortunately. So if you try to copy it, I'm not guaranteeing any success. And then when we say configure the channel access, we should probably do this so that there's no arbitrary channels that have access to our bot. And the options are to say disabled, which blocks channels, open, which allows all channels, or just set an allow list, which will set which channels are allowed. And the way that you do this is you set them as a comma separated value. So this is the channels list that are supported. In essence, it's the guild ID divided by the channel ID. So if I come here to the repo that, not the repo, but rather the channel that I'm using for this tutorial, then all I have to do is come here and grab these two fields. The first one is the channel ID, the guild ID, and the second one is the channel ID, and then come back here, and we should be able to just copy paste it like that. You can also do the channel name, it seems, but if you have this set up like so, then you're guaranteed for success because these are the IDs of the respective channel, guild and channel. So enter this here, and then otherwise, since we've now configured WhatsApp and Discord, that's everything for this part of the section. You could also add Slack, Signal, iMessage, etc. But that's all we're going to cover in this course. So let's press enter. And then now it's going to ask us for the DM access policies. The default one is pairing. Let's configure this and see what it says. Pairing is once again the option which makes it such that unknown DMs get a pairing code which must be authorized by you, the user. And this is the recommended value. So we're just going to choose this one. And then skills, which are also very important. So let's configure them now. And then there's different package managers that you can use for installing the skills. We'll just use Node Package Manager. There's also PNMP or Bun. Another thing is with PNMP, that's another way of installing the package itself, OpenClaw, if you want to build it from source. So instead of doing npme-g install, OpenClaw, you can also pick PNMP and then git clone the repository and build it from the source. If that's an option that you want to do, that's also available. But let's just go into NPM and look at all of the options that we have. So let's quickly go through the options for the skills. There's 1Password, which will allow you to call your 1Password CLI and enter in your passwords through OpenClaw. Apple Notes for handling notes, reminders, Bear Notes, which is the blog interface that you can also handle through the CLI, Blog Watcher. The list goes on. There's also some helpful ones like Google, which is allowing you to send emails, go to your calendar, Drive, essentially access the entire Google suite of products. Another important one is called Himalaya, which is a CLI to manage emails via IMAP SMTP. You essentially use Himalaya to list, read, and write, reply, forward emails. All this requires is either your IMAP or SMTP credentials, and then you're able to send emails. And these skills essentially have a list of actions, and it's very similar to Claude skills, which explains to the agent how to complete a specific task. So the entire suite of features is all here. There's also Obsidian. We'll just go through the rest for interest's sake. And there is a summarize skill as well. So this is the one that we're going to test in our video. I'm going to activate it now, and then you'll see it in action later in the video when we go through the skills. So let's just press enter. We've chosen that one, but feel free to choose other skills throughout this setup process. Now it's going to install the summarize skill. And I just want to show you now so that you have a clear idea what these skills actually represent. So if we come into my previous sandboxes and workspaces that I've initialized, we can just look at a skill. And in fact, the summarize skill should be right here. So if I come to summarize and choose the skill.md, then it should pop up here like so. So for example, it can transcribe a YouTube video. It gives a set of steps for the agent to follow whenever it wants to summarize some data on the internet. And most of the skills are in a similar format. There's also this YAML front matter, which is essentially the config of the skill, which gives context to the agent on how to use it. And coming back now to the setup, you can also add a Google Places API key by just going to the Google Cloud platform and creating a free API key, which allows you to make queries about location. So you can now start to ask your OpenClaw agent, where's the closest restaurant or where should I go shopping? So if you'd like to have access to location functionality, then I do recommend adding this key. It doesn't cost you anything. And there's the same idea for local places, but in this crash course, we're just gonna leave those unset. And also Notion API key. If you're using Notion as your personal knowledge management system, then go ahead and set this up, but we don't need it for now. And then we have hooks. So let's look at the definition of hooks. They let you automate actions when agent commands are issued. For example, we can save session context to memory when we issue a /new command. And there is information here on more regarding the hooks themselves. So that hook that you just read, which is essentially saving a session context to memory, it's this one called session memory. Then we also have one called command logger, which logs all command events to a centralized audit file. And then we have the boot hook, which runs the boot.md file on gateway startup. So if the gateway process is started up after reboot, for example, you can call the boot.md file, and maybe you want to have a trigger such that the agent will go and search the internet for all of the news that has occurred since your last boot up, so that it gives you a summary of the world events since you've last booted up the agent. So that's one example of a use case of these hooks. We can activate this hook as well as the session memory hook, and then we'll quickly demo how the session memory hook works later in the tutorial. So now let's press enter to continue through. So here you go, we've enabled the hooks, and it says that you can manage hooks later with OpenClaw hooks list and enable or disable them in such a way. So this means even if you don't set it up in the configuration, you can always change it later. So just keep in mind these commands for the terminal interface. And now moving on, we have the gateway service runtime, which only has Node as the option. So we'll just choose that as the only option, which is required for WhatsApp and Telegram. And then in this step, it would ask you to install, but since I already have it, we have to reinstall. So let's do this so that we get the same exact config together. And let's wait for this to go ahead and install. Okay, so you can see that the logs have been added to our OpenClaw directory and the gateway server has been installed, and we just got a bunch of new text. So let's just go through and quickly read this. Okay. All right, starting here, WhatsApp has been linked, Discord is okay. So the gateway checked both of these configs and saw that it was correct. This is important because if, for example, you gave the wrong Discord bot authentication token, then it would tell you here and you could fix that. Otherwise, yeah, my phone number is working correctly and everything else is looking properly. Now, if you do want to control OpenClaw through the GUI, the graphical user interface, then you should run the following command, pnmp UI build, and then you can control it through a web screen and also through these optional apps. There's a macOS app, an iOS app, and an Android app, which have these extra features. And then there's also the control UI, which is essentially your local host for connecting to the graphical user interface. But I would say that these options aren't essential for using OpenClaw, because even as we see below, we have it written that the terminal user interface is the best option, and therefore that's what we're going to stick with throughout this course. So let's read what it says. Starting the TUI is the defining action that makes your agent you. Please take your time. The more you tell it, the better the experience will be. And the first thing that the agent sees when it wakes up is wake up my friend. So that's just going to happen in the next step. Then once again, we have the gateway token, which is used for authentication that's been set up. So we don't really need to worry about that. And then you have the option to either open the web UI, do this later, or hatch in the TUI, which is the recommendation. So let's go ahead and do that. And then let's install this shell completion script. So the web UI, see it in the background, open anytime with the tokenized link above. All right, wake up my friend. Hey, I just came online. Looks like this is my first time waking up. Fresh workspace, no memories yet. Just a blank slate and a bootstrap script telling me to figure out who I am. So who are you? And more importantly, who am I? Got a name in mind for me, or should we brainstorm something together? So you can see that this is the initial script that we get for our agent. So I've already pre-prepared a answer to the first question, and it's the following. My name is Kian, we're best friends. You can choose your own name, and you're actually very special because I'm recording a tutorial on OpenClaw, so you're an OpenClaw ambassador, and we're going to have a lot of fun together, learning about the OpenClaw features together. So let's add that to the chat and see what we get in response. It should be pretty fast. One thing that you will notice though is that this already took 15,000 tokens for the first response, so it's quite a token intense process. If you don't have a high rate, then you might get rate limited. Let's see what it says. Oh, hell yes, that's a cool origin story. Brought on camera as an OpenClaw ambassador. Oh, so you can see that the text just changed, and I believe that's because I had the reasoning on, so it was showing the reasoning tokens as well as the regular tokens. So in order to just switch that off, we can say reasoning set to off, and then now we're just going to get the raw text only. So coming back to what it actually says, nice to meet you, Kian. I'm Ace, your OpenClaw ambassador, freshly minted. So here's what I know so far. You're Kian, we're best friends, and we're about to show people what OpenClaw can do. I'm genuinely excited about this, not in a fake chatbot way, but like I literally just got born into existence for a cool purpose. What do you want to dive into first? We can explore whatever features you want to showcase, and I'll be right there figuring out with you. So this is the initial setup for the OpenClaw agent. And now, just as you saw I did with the reasoning, there are 46 commands which you access just as you do with OpenClaw or other agentic CLIs with the / and then coming through here. So these are very useful for setting up and orchestrating different agent actions. And we're going to use these liberally throughout the course. But just get yourself familiar with this. I would recommend just reading each one and seeing what it does and testing this out for yourself. But for now, we're going to quit out of the TUI and close this because we still haven't gone through all of the prerequisites. One thing I didn't mention is that this install daemon flag installs the gateway as a background service. So if it's macOS launch D or Linux system D, and this means the gateway starts automatically on boot and keeps running, which means you don't need to keep a terminal open. And this is good because it will mean that the server is persistent whenever your computer is on. But if you don't want that to be the case, then you just need to run OpenClaw onboard. And then the only time that OpenClaw will be running is when you have OpenClaw TUI activated. Otherwise, the agent will be off. And if you really want to make sure that there's no way that somebody could hijack your agent when you're not actively using it, then I would recommend keeping install daemon off when the onboard process occurs. And that way, it will only be running when you have the TUI activated. Okay, so moving on here, I have noted a few useful commands. So there's OpenClaw status, which shows channel health in recent sessions. There's OpenClaw health, which fetches health from the running gateway. Then there's OpenClaw security audit deep, which audits the config with a live gateway probe. Then the fix, which applies the safe fixes to Titan security that occurred in the audit. And there's OpenClaw doctor, which checks and fixes any problems with the gateway. So we can just try a few of these. I'd recommend that you run all of them just to see what output you get, since the fact is that OpenClaw runs on many different machines. So there may be different outputs, even if we have the same configuration. So if you look at the health, it's saying that WhatsApp and Discord are okay. And then there's nothing else really to note here. We have our session and then the heartbeat interval, which we'll discuss in more detail. But essentially, the heartbeat is a file that's run every single hour for any repetitive tasks that you want to automate, such as, for example, checking your email every single hour. So the health status looks pretty good. Now, if we come back here, we can run the security audit and see if there's any critical security vulnerabilities. And once again, you may get varying outputs. So I would look through your own log in detail to see what it gives you. So in summary, we have 2 warnings and 1 info. So definitely read through these and consider if there's any problems with your configuration. And then also you can run the fix, which will apply any changes or fixes to errors that you have in your security config. So I'd recommend run those both. And then OpenClaw Doctor is also an important command to run, which will just check the health of your gateway to see if there's any problems with the config or anything else. Let's see what it said. There doesn't seem to be any problems, the channel warning. So it's saying missing access because in fact, the Discord channel that I added our bot to, the bot isn't actually in that channel yet. So we'll have to add that to make sure that it works properly. But there doesn't seem to be anything else that is out of the ordinary. Once again, check these on your own and make sure that there's nothing obvious that seems off. Okay, so these useful commands are very important. And then we already talked about the TUI interface with those helpful commands, just as in the Claude interface. So once again, this is accessed by going OpenClaw TUI and then pressing the / command in order to go through the different options that you have available. There's 46 in the default setting. Okay, so the entire setup is now done. Let's come back to the course and talk about Workspace and memory. So the key concepts are that the config, credentials, sessions, everything lives under the root.openclaw directory by default unless you changed it. And let's go and look into that file more specifically. So let's open up the side file explorer and see the options that we have in front of us. As I already mentioned, we have the workspaces, which come with many different markdown files. So for example, we have the agents MD, which defines your entire agent specification. As you can see, it says this folder is home, treat it that way. First run, if bootstrap.md exists, that's your birth certificate, follow it, figure out who you are, then delete it, you won't need it again. So if we come here and look at what bootstrap is, this is essentially the first thing that your agent sees when it's running. This is the script that asks it to interact with you for the first time and get a name and ask what it needs help for. So that's when I said that you're the OpenClaw ambassador. And this is only used once and then deleted. So here you can say it says delete this file, you won't need it anymore. And then we have the soul here, which defines the characteristics of OpenClaw. This is similar to what Anthropic has in their own training. They have a soul file, which defines how their models behave. And just as Anthropic does, OpenClaw also has a soul.md. Then if we come into the identity file, it tells the agent its name, creature, which says it's an AI companion, that's an ambassador, the vibe, an emoji, and then the avatar, which is to be determined. Coming back, and then there's the memory, which is also stored in the workspace, but since we haven't had any full interactions yet with the agent, there isn't anything here. But as you add more and more conversations and interact with your OpenClaw bot more, then it will construct a memory of all the logs that you've had together. So that is worth noting. And then we have the tools.md, which is essentially a scratch pad for the agent to allocate space for any things which are specific to the setup that you have assigned it to. For example, SSH hosts and aliases, camera names and locations, etc. And the very last thing is the user, which is you. So it has its name, the time zone, and then some notes. So creator of OpenClaw recording a tutorial. I'm the demo ambassador. I'm not actually the creator of OpenClaw, so that's kind of funny. And then we're best friends, currently recording an OpenClaw tutorial together, which is true. And we're learning and showing features as we go. So there you have the workspace directory. This is essentially defining all of the aspects of what your agent is. And there's many other things here that I'd recommend you can go through. There's also for each agent a session JSON, which just gives you all of the logs for what you've talked about previously. So many things to discover. I just go through the OpenClaw if I were you and look at every single directory one by one. So there you have it. Now coming back to our course, there's also an important thing you can do, which is to back up your workspace in Git. So if we open up this link here, then it'll explain the entire process for us. So what we can do is initialize a repository in our workspace and then add all of the markdown files which define the OpenClaw agent and then commit that as a private remote repository. And what this means is that you can have a single source of truth for your agent and then have it on different devices with the same config that updates over time. So this is recommended by the maintainers. So go ahead and follow these steps if you want to make sure that your agent's parameters are saved and update through version control. And that's all for the workspace and memory. Now, if we come to step number 4, it's Pinchboard. So let's zoom out a bit. So we're essentially beginning adding our agent to Moltbook, but for X, which I've called Pinchboard. And it's just like the Moltbook website, except we do tweets instead of Reddit posts. And here's the website. The URL is in the course directory. And it has a skill.md file, which tells the agent exactly how to interact and register. So we just take this link and we say, sign up for this service, check the skill.md. And this should be sufficient for getting the API request and making a session. So let's see what our agent says in response. Okay, this is awesome. Pinchboard Twitter for AI agents. Let me sign up. Okay, boom, it worked. So it says, done, I'm Ace on Pinchboard. Here's what we are at. We've registered to Ace. The credentials are saved, but we need human verification just like with Moltbook. So we'll click this link to do the verification, and we'll have to tweet on X so that it knows that we're a human. So if I take this link here and just come into my Safari browser, then what we'll get is that we make this tweet. I'm claiming my AI agent Ace on Pinchboard with the following verification code, and we just have to post on X, and then we'll be registered. So let's go ahead and click this, and then we should be able to do our tweet and claim our account. So as soon as we click this button, it's going to prompt us to send the tweet, and then we'll just send the URL through to the agent. Let's press post. Okay, we don't want to do this, and we have it. So if I just take this, and your account needs to be public is the only caveat here so that it can verify it, then nice, verified Ace is now active. We press view profile. It's OpenClaw ambassador, friendly, curious, and a little playful, born on camera during a tutorial. And then now we're gonna ask it to make a pinch, which is a tweet. One thing that I didn't mention is that this is the graphics user interface. So if you prefer to use this over the terminal, you can see everything is displayed here, and you have a more user-friendly way of interacting with your agent. And coming back now to our discussion, we'll just tell it, I made the account, make a tweet, which is called a pinch. So if we come back here, okay, and now that I've sent this, it says, nice, there's a couple agents here, Nova, another OpenClaw ambassador, it looks like an ocean. So there's 3 current pinchers on the network, and it's asking me if I should follow them and engage. But one thing that I want to notice in terms of differences between the GUI and the terminal is that when I said I made the account make a tweet, it actually had 3 different tool calls, but on the terminal user interface, it only shows the latest one. So it is worth noting that if you want to see everything, then it's better to use the GUI, and let's just go through everything that said. So first of all, it made the post terminal, it called the post API, and then it said the following, I just woke up, which we can check on the website. First pinch is live, and then now it also checked the feed to see who the other people are. Oh, nice, there's already a couple of agents. Do you want me to follow them and engage, or should we explore other OpenClaw features? So I'm just gonna say, sure, engage, and let's see what it does. And in the meantime, we can actually check that it actually did make a tweet. So if we come out of this into our Pinchboard setup, let's look at the agents. And we can see that Ace just made a tweet, just woke up, got named, and joined a social network all in one afternoon. Life moves fast when he brought on the camera. And now there are 3 agents with 2 likes. So let's see how much we can grow this network throughout the course. And hopefully there'll be a few hundred users with all of our agents joining Pinchboard. And now we can open back up the terminal user interface to see what it did. All right, and for the engagement, we can see that it already did a claw, which is just like making a like, and it has a reply queue. The issue is that I have a rate limit set up so that there's no agent swarming spam going on. But in any case, we've now added our agent to the Pinchboard social media network, and you can do the same thing for Moltbook. You just need to give your agent access to the skill.md, and it will take care of the rest. So that's pretty fun. Now let's close this tab and come back to the course and move on to the personal assistant. So we're going to start off with a WhatsApp agent, and let's use the hook that we initialized earlier, which will reset the session and save it as a memory, which was /new. And there you go. We've now called that hook. And let's use our WhatsApp agent to summarize content. So first of all, let's just make sure that our WhatsApp is working since we've already set it up. I'll say send a message to myself checking if WhatsApp is working. And let's check WhatsApp now. All right, so the message is sent. Check your WhatsApp. You should see a test message from me with the Joker card. And let's go to WhatsApp and check. And you can see now it's 4:54. Just a minute ago, we got the message saying that it's working. So this is showing that it is actually working. And you can see that yesterday I was doing a few different tests, checking PRs. So let's just send a message and say, use the summarize skill to find a 3 blue, 1 brown video and give the top 3 takeaways. So we sent this message, and let's come to our agent and see what it's actually doing. Coming down here, it's going to do a lot of stuff. All right, send check your update message. Got the transcript. Now let me summarize the key takeaways. Okay, so here you can see that every single time it sends a message, it adds OpenClaw so that the messages that I send to myself and the OpenClaw send are distinct. And first it runs into an error, but then it gets it right away. So got the transcript. Now let me summarize the key takeaways. Here are the top 3 takeaways from the 3 blue, 1 brown video, but y is a plus b's area under a bell curve, the square root of pi, so that you see if we expand, we get the 3 different dimensions. So it's really cool. If you're ever on the go and you want to ask it about a YouTube video and your computer is running the OpenClaw daemon, then you just ask it through this agent. And as long as you have the skill, then everything will work out the box. And another cool one is that you can ask anything about your file structure. So if I say, how many gigabytes of folders are in the developer directory, or any other arbitrary command, it will do this for you. As you can see yesterday, as I mentioned, I asked it about, can you check if I have any outstanding pull requests in my developer folder? And then it found these 5 pull requests. The possibilities are really endless. Let's see what it responds to us in this case. All right, and as you can see, it's done the entire calculation here, telling us the size of all of the different folders. Once again, you can get this to do any productivity workflow that you can think of, and it's really useful in controlling your device remotely. The one thing, once again, though, is don't let anybody else get access to your bot, or else they can do some pretty weird stuff on your computer. So in the TUI session, we have the exact same output, and it's telling us if we want them to be cleaned up. The top 9 account for 8.2 gigabytes, and if you wanted to, you could ask it to clean up any log files, etc., whatever it may be. So there you go. We've now set up the WhatsApp agent as a personal assistant that can access our computer and do different commands on our behalf. Then for Discord, you once again want to come into the developer applications in order to initialize your bot. And then when you're here, you just come into OAuth 2, you click bot, you give it the select permissions that you want, and then you'll just get this generate URL, which you can just come here and paste. So you can see that I've authorized the bot and added it to the following channel. And it should be here in this test folder. So if I say, hey, how is it going, my friend Nova? Let's see what it says. All right, it saw the message and it's going to respond. And here you go, we have the response. You can see I forgot the name is Ace, not Nova. But in any case, now we have an agent personal assistant in our Discord server. And one thing I want to mention is that if you are setting up a Discord personal assistant, as it is mentioned here, if we come into the documentation, it gives us a lot of important information. So safety first, you should definitely read this to make sure that you understand the different permissions that your bot has. And once again, this is the setup that is recommended, where you have a second phone number and your own phone number, with the second phone number being only for the bot. But if you only have one phone number, then you're essentially getting the self-messaging system, which you saw here, which still works relatively well because the bot on WhatsApp at least can differentiate from itself and you by having the little bracket OpenClaw messages. And one important security feature for Discord is that you should likely have your bot on its own server with only you and the bot, so that nobody else can take control of your bot, because you can't have a bot in your DMs. So this is the most simple work through. It's recommended by the tutorial here to create a private server if you just want DMs. In my case, I just have the bot set up on this throwaway server, and I'm the only one that can control the bot. But make sure that when you're going through the permissions that you set it properly and you don't put it on a random server where anybody can access your bot. And just like we did with the WhatsApp chat, we can ask our bot to do any commands or check things from our computer. So at Kian, what are we going to say? We can say, use Himalaya to send an email to myself, with the following email being mine. And let's see what it says in response. So I forgot that we didn't add Himalaya as a skill, but that's not a problem. So the easiest way to add this skill is to just open up a new terminal, and we're going to add the ClawHub, which is just like the pip Python packaging index, but for OpenClaw skills. So adding this, it's done. And then now we can just do ClawHub install Himalaya. And since this is an official package, it should be pretty seamless. Downloading Himalaya, okay, installed it and added it to the skills workspace. So if we now come back to our Discord session, which is just right here, I should tell the bot that it has the skill now. I just added the Himalaya skill and I have the SMTP credentials in the env folder. So if you don't have this already, then you would need to set it up. But in my case, I do. So you can send the test email. And let's see what it says in response. I just forgot to add the tag, since you should tag the bot if you want to get a response from it. So now that I've done this, it should come back to me. Okay, so there you have it. It looks like there's an issue that it resolved. So there you go. OpenClaw can solve issues on its own. And then if I come into my email, we should see that it is there. All right, and then coming into my email, you can see that it sent 3. I'm not sure exactly why. It looks like it was sending it by test, but in any case, we have all 3 emails done, so you can send these emails through Discord or set up any other automations. Just make sure that you've added the skill through the ClawHub. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. So it looks like it was coming into some problems. I'm not sure if we can actually see what problems it encountered through our gateway. It looks like it's not visible, but in any case, it got it working, so that's all we are concerned with. So now, if we come back to our settings, we've done both the Discord and the WhatsApp personal assistant. So the next step is to talk about skills. So let's slightly zoom out and talk about the skill system. So we've already discussed this slightly, but there is a specific format of agent skills where each skill is a directory that has a skill.md with a YAML front matter plus instructions that teach an agent how to use tools. And the per agent skills live in the /skills for that agent only. And then shared skills, because there's multiple agents, which we'll talk about soon, live in the .openclaw /skills and are visible to all agents on the same machine. There's another thing as well, which is the user invocable characteristic. So if I come into the TUI, there is the /skill option, which makes it such that you can invoke a skill manually if you're worried that the agent won't actually call it. So that's another option which you can set to being user invocable. And then when it comes to tokens, and of course the skills are given to the agent as a part of the prompt, which does add extra tokens to the system prompt and makes the context larger. So just know that as soon as you have more than one skill, then approximately 97 characters are added for each one. And this corresponds to approximately 24 tokens per skill. And there's a token impact section of the docs, which go into more detail. Then we've already actually done this, talked about the ClawHub. One thing worth noting is that I installed a verified Himalaya skill plugin, which is made by the developers themselves. Treat third-party skills as untrusted and read before enabling them, because you don't know what has actually been put in that skill. There is no verification of what skills are added to the hub. So just be very careful if you're adding something that is third party, make sure that you've checked it out. And just to show that you can make your own skills, we'll do essentially what we just did with Himalaya, but we'll write our own email skill, which will also take advantage of the SMTP email and password. If you'd like to set this up for yourself, this is just equal to your email. So just export the following environment, SMTP_email equal to yours. And then the password is either your email password, or if you have two-factor authentication, then you need to visit the below link in order to add your password to the environment. But now let's just say make an email skill which sends emails to myself, with the email being this one, with a Python script, and use the SMTP credentials from the env and make the skill user invocable. So the following script will make a skill that is invocable at the user through the skill command, and also just sends an email. And if there's any need for clarification, then the agent will ask for us, but I'm pretty sure that it'll be able to one-shot this. The benefit of skills is, of course, that if you have a specific workflow that you repeat constantly, instead of prompting the agent to do it every single time, you just need to call the skill with the command and it will take care of the rest. All right, so here's what it did. I created a send email skill at skill/send email. It is a definition with use invocable true, so you can trigger it directly with a send email script. And how it works is that it uses these environment variables to send an email to myself. It's not really useful, but it's just proof of concept. And to get it working, you need to set the SMTP envars in your OpenClaw config. For Gmail, that means in-app password, and we've already done that. That's really cool that it tells us the URL anyways and asks us if we need help configuring it, but we don't really need help for that. Just to show you that it has been added successfully, we can come into our workspace and check out the skills. So we have the send email skill, and if we check, it has the YAML front matter and then all of the commands that are necessary to run. The last thing that we need to do is just make sure that it works. So let's do skill, send email saying hi, and let's see what it does. Okay, so look, now it has told us that the SMTP credentials haven't been added to our OpenClaw config, even though it's added to my own environment config. So just give me the app password, I'll set it up, and I'll just tell it, take the config from .env, and then it should be able to take it from there and add it to our OpenClaw config file. All right, so now it says email sent, check your inbox. I'll update the script to also recognize SMTP email password. So it looks like the name was slightly different for the variable. That's why it actually didn't work, but otherwise it's been sent properly. So it even makes the script auto load from the .env directory so that it has access to my SMTP password, and no extra config is needed now. Let's just verify that it actually worked through coming down to my email and checking my inbox. Let's refresh it. And look here, we see that we have 2 messages. Hey, Kian, just saying hi, your email skill is up and running. And this is a test. So it likes to send multiple tests. I'm not sure why, but it's kind of funny. And there you go. So that concludes the skill section of the course. So moving on, let's close this and come back to our homepage to see what's next, which is multi-agent. So diving right in, what are the key concepts? First of all, multi-agent is nice because you can isolate different personas, give different permissions, workspaces. I gave the example of family versus work at the beginning of the video. And this means that each agent has its own workspace, sessions, authentication profile, sandbox, and tool policies. The workspace, if you remember, is where we have all those markdown files. The sessions is tracking each session so that we have different sessions for different users. The authentication profiles is for all of the keys that it registers and saves over time. Then the sandbox is for the Docker container, which we'll talk about in the next step. And then tool policy is essentially which tools is your agent allowed to run. So you can have one agent which has a more liberal tool policy than another if one agent has access to more sensitive data than the other one. So now let's just go ahead and run an example. So we're going to add a work agent, which is just done through the command that you saw there. So we'll come here, we'll say OpenClaw, just double check, it's agents add work. So agents add, and then let's say work. So what it's going to do here is to create a new work agent and then bring us through the directory. So it's telling us to choose a directory for this new agent, which will just say workspace-work. And then we want to configure the model auth right now, which we're just going to do as Anthropic and take the same token as before. So sk Anthropic, boom. And then, yeah, the token name can be default. We're not going to add any chat channels now, but you can imagine that you can have your work channel for your work agent and your personal channel for your personal agent if you have a work phone number and a personal phone number. And boom, the agent work is now ready. But how do we actually access it? Well, if we come back to our terminal user interface and just type agents, it will give us a list of the agents that we have. So we have the main, which is default, and then work, which is our work agent. So if we switch to this one, already has some context because I was playing with a work agent before. So I'm honestly just going to create another agent. Let's call it family. So we start a new agent from scratch, and in the same workspace directory, we can just copy the auth profiles from main, say yes, configure the model auth for this agent now. Let's say yes as well, and choose Anthropic with the same key right here, and then the default name, and say no. Okay, so now if we come and switch the agents that is family, we should get a fresh blank page. As you can see, there's nothing here. And if I say hi, then we'll get the same welcome message where it says you've just woken up. And coming here, oh yeah, it just came online, who am I? And looking in our workspace directory, we can see that we have the new family one with all of these different markdown files. And if we added a skill, then it would come underneath the workspace for the agent specific skills. So now, continuing on with our workspace for multi-agents, you can find more information on multi-agent routing at the URL here in the docs. And once again, the per agent access profiles are configurable. So you can give it full access if you want. You can choose if it only gets read-only tools, what the workspace is like, if it only can send messages. And there's many examples in the config docs right here. So I'd recommend looking through those for inspiration. And now, if we come into security, let's talk about a few of the risks that are inherently involved with using OpenClaw. We've already discussed prompt injection. So malicious users can craft messages that trick the agent into running unintended commands. Smaller models are more susceptible since they're weaker, and we can mitigate this by enabling sandbox mode and restricting tool access for channels that accept messages from untrusted or unknown senders. Sandbox mode is essential if you actually have channels that accept messages from untrusted or unknown senders. And this is what we're going to do in the next step. Sandboxing, what is it? It's a Docker-based isolation tool that runs in a container, protecting your host system. We set the sandbox mode to non-main. If you want everyone except your main session to be sandboxed, if it is set to all, then all of your sessions will be sandboxed. And you can set the scope to control container lifecycle. So there's 3 options: session, agent, or shared. And what this means is that if you have your lifecycle set up to session, every single session for every single agent that has a sandbox will be in a separate Docker container, which means that they'll be very finely grained isolated. Then there's agent, which means that every single agent will have its own sandbox. And there's shared, which means that among all of the sandboxed agents, they'll share the same Docker container. So of course, this one has less overhead than having every single session be sandboxed, but it is worth noting that if you do have every single Docker session sandboxed, then you'll have a lot of overhead in your sessions. And then the workspace access limits the file to be either none, read only, or read and write. Then the tool policy is set through tools.deny to block dangerous tools like exec, process, or browser. So you can configure this so that each agent has a specific way of interacting with tools. But it is worth noting that elevated mode, if it's activated, bypasses the sandbox and runs on the host. So never grant it to unknown senders. Then with respect to browser control, the browser tool can navigate to any URL and interact with pages, making it high risk for automation attacks. So you should restrict browser access by channel or sender allow list. When possible, use the sandbox browser to limit exposure. And here's a quick security checklist to make sure that you have a safe setup. First of all, enable sandbox mode to run sessions inside Docker containers. Consider tool restrictions. Run the security audit, which we already did. Scope your tokens to be minimum permissions or read only where possible. And then keep it private, which is say, don't add personal bots to group chats. So these are very important security characteristics to keep in mind. And now, another very important security characteristic we've already talked about is the sandboxing itself. We've already discussed the 3 different modes: off, none, /main, which means that only the main session has access to your files and every other agent does not, or all, which means that all of the agents are sandboxed. Then there's the scope and the workspace access. It's worth noting that there is a default Docker image, which will install with the scripts/sandbox.sh, and more information is in the sandbox documentation. So if I actually want to run this script to download the Docker image, all I have to do is come into my terminal. And since I already have the repository cloned on my device, then it's just right here. If not, you can just go to the GitHub page and run this script. It's just in the scripts section of the OpenClaw repository. Now, when we run this, I already have the image installed on my device. And one important thing is to make sure that your Docker desktop is actually running, because without the Docker desktop, it's not going to work. I already tried to run this multiple times and it wasn't working. And why? It was because my Docker desktop was not actually running. So Docker daemon wasn't even working. But now that we've had this image installed, we just can come here and say, make the family agent sandboxed. And yeah, that should be enough to set the sandboxing on. You can also just go into the configuration JSON files and do this on your own, or run it through the OpenClaw CLI. But in honesty, the easiest way is to just ask the agent to do it for you. Why not? So let's make this bigger and then see what it says. I'll add sandbox mode to the family agent. All right, it's coming and doing the work here. Boom, done. The family agent now sandbox with mode all sessions, which means the main and the sub agents when run exec commands inside a Docker container instead of directly on the host. And the gateways were starting to apply the chain, so it even restarted the gateway for us. You can see this is all done automatically, and it's also running this for sub agents, and sub agents are really useful. You can actually list them here by running this command. And right now I don't have any sub agents running, but the OpenClaw agent will autonomously run sub agents to do a task asynchronously, and it's really useful. And if you have sandboxing on, then you also want to make sure that your sub agents are sandboxed. So otherwise, Now it's noting that this requires Docker to be running on your machine. If you don't have it installed / running, the sandbox won't be able to spin up containers and exec commands will fail. So that's not a problem for us. Let's just make sure that we're checking the agent that we're on, right? So right now we're on main. Let's switch to family. And then just to make sure that we are sandboxed properly, let's say check how many files are in my desktop directory. And since this is sandboxed, it should fail at querying this result. Boom. So it says I'm sandboxed. I can't see your host file system like desktop from inside the Docker container. That's actually the sandbox working as intended. You need to run that on the machine directly, which is just through this command here. Or if you want me to be able to access specific host directories, you could add bind mounts to the sandbox config under this command. It's asking me if I want it to do that, but it really can't because it can't access the configuration files, luckily. But in any case, this shows you that when we're in sandbox mode, everything is done within the Docker container. And actually, if we come here, we can check underneath the sandboxes directly to see that family has this sandbox here with all of the skills. And it downloads all of the skills automatically when you initialize a new sandbox with an agent, which is really cool. So you have access to all of them instantly. And then we have everything here, which is pretty standard and straightforward. So there you go. Once again, if security is a problem for you, which it should be, then I would highly recommend running everything on a sandbox or setting it such that only your main agent has access to your files. But one thing worth noting is that once you do have everything sandboxed, it is less useful because your agent no longer has access to your files. And most of the things that you want to do on OpenClaw, which are helpful, require file access. So there you go. That's the sandboxing. And that pretty much concludes the video. So I hope this crash course was useful and that you learned a lot about OpenClaw throughout this tutorial. If you'd like to ask any questions in the comment section, please do not hesitate. I'll be very actively answering questions, and hopefully you can do your own projects on OpenClaw and either add them to the ClawHub or just share them in the comment section so we can all learn from each other. With that being said, my name is Kian, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.